I was in the twilight of my life when I lost everything in a devastating flood. My own daughter closed her doors to me when I needed her most. Desperate, I called my high school sweetheart, a man I hadn't seen in 46 years. When he opened the door and said, "Welcome home," I realized that sometimes you have to lose it all to find what truly matters. But before we continue, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. My name is Clara, and at 64, I thought I'd already experienced every form of grief life could throw at me. I was wrong. The flood alarm blared on an ordinary Wednesday at 10:45 a.m. I was in the kitchen where I'd raised my only daughter, Amelia, brewing tea, while the news played on the radio. The weatherman had mentioned heavy rain, but here in Cedar Creek, that was just routine. We'd weathered plenty of storms. I should have paid closer attention. The sky darkened faster than I had ever seen, and within minutes, it took on a threatening greenish-gray hue that made my stomach churn with a primal fear. I switched on the emergency radio and heard the words that would change everything. Severe flash flood warning. The river is rapidly overflowing its banks into the Riverbend district, my district. I had maybe 15 minutes to save what I could. My hands shook as I shoved photo albums, documents, and a few pieces of jewelry into a small suitcase. 40 years of memories and all I could salvage fit inside that one bag. My wedding picture with David, Amelia's baby photos, my mother's pearl necklace, everything else had to stay. The rain hammered against the windows with a growing fury as I climbed into the attic, the only place that might stay dry. The steps groaned under my feet, protesting the weight of my desperate escape. I huddled in a dusty corner, clutching the suitcase to my chest and listening to a sound like a runaway train tearing my world apart below. The house moaned and creaked, fighting against a force far greater than the sturdy frame David had been so proud of. Then came the silence, that terrible empty silence that means everything you once knew is gone. When I finally made my way back down the attic stairs, my legs could barely hold me. Where my living room used to be, there was only sky. Open sky and debris scattered like confetti after a cruel celebration. The kitchen table where Amelia did her homework was embedded in what was left of the garage wall. My violet garden, which I'd tended for 18 years, looked as if it had been put through a blender. I stood there amidst the ruins of my life, still holding the soaked suitcase, and cried for the first time since David's funeral 6 years ago. A neighbor, sweet Mrs. Gable, took me in for the first night. She insisted, but her own home was damaged, and she had her own family to worry about. The city set up temporary shelters, but the thought of sleeping in a gymnasium full of strangers made me feel even more lost. That's when I knew I had to call Amelia. My daughter lives about an hour away in Oak Ridge, in a leafy subdivision with houses straight out of a design magazine. She moved there 3 years ago after a promotion to regional manager at her tech firm. We weren't as close as we should have been, but she was the only family I had left. I used Mrs. Gable's phone, since mine was buried somewhere under what used to be my bedroom. My hands trembled as I dialed the number, one I had memorized but rarely used for anything beyond birthdays or Christmas. "Amelia, honey, it's Mom." My voice sounded more fragile than I intended. The conversation was short, almost businesslike. I explained about the flood, the house, and my need for a temporary place to stay. There was a long pause on her end before she finally agreed. The relief was so intense I nearly fainted. My daughter would take care of me. Despite our distance, the missed calls, and the awkward holiday dinners, she was still my little girl. The insurance adjuster arrived the next morning, a young man with dark circles under his eyes who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He walked through the remains of my home with a clipboard and a camera, making occasional notes. "Total loss," he said casually, as if those 2 words didn't represent my entire existence. "How much?" I asked, dreading the answer. "With your policy, after the deductible and depreciation, you're looking at about $220,000. $220,000 to rebuild 40 years of a life. It felt impossible. Mrs. Gable helped me pack what little I could salvage into her car: 3 plastic bags of clothes that smelled of mud and disaster, the suitcase with photos and documents, and David's toolbox, which had somehow survived in the garage. It was all that was left of the life I'd built. The drive to Amelia's felt like a journey to a foreign country. Everything looked different when you had no home to return to. The familiar landmarks, the gas station where I always bought my lottery tickets, the bakery where David and I used to have coffee on Sundays, seemed to belong to someone else's life now. Amelia's neighborhood was untouched by the flood. Perfect lawns, pristine sidewalks, and perfect lives carried on exactly as they had the day before. I felt like an intruder, bringing my disaster into their immaculate world. Her house was a modern 2-story construction with large windows and a dark wood door that her boyfriend Julian had picked out. I'd met him only twice in the 18 months they'd been together. He was 38 to her 39, worked for a downtown investment firm, and had an opinion on everything from coffee brands to international politics. I pulled Mrs. Gable's car into their driveway and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. This is temporary, I told myself. Just until I figure out the next step. Just until the insurance money comes through and I can find a small apartment. I never imagined that walking up to my own daughter's front door, carrying my 3 bags of belongings, would be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But as I raised my hand to knock, I felt a familiar hollowness, the same sensation I'd felt when David died, like the ground was disappearing from under my feet. I just didn't know how much further I was about to fall. Amelia opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching from the window. For a brief moment, seeing her familiar face, David's eyes, my stubborn chin, made me feel that everything might be okay. She was my daughter, my only child. Surely blood meant something. Mom. She stepped aside, but her voice held a distance I couldn't quite place. Discomfort, maybe. Julian appeared right behind her, as if waiting in the wings. He wore dress slacks and a shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His hair was impeccably styled, and his smile was the kind that never reached his eyes. "Clara, how terrible about your house," he said, his gaze fixed on my bags. Not me. Amelia told me what happened. I set my bags on the pristine entryway floor, suddenly aware of how I must look. My clothes still carried the scent of disaster, wet wood, mud, and something else I couldn't name. Destruction, perhaps. Loss. "It's just temporary," I said quickly, "just until I can get back on my feet." Amelia and Julian exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations couples have, the kind that excludes everyone else. I'd shared countless looks like that with David, but being on the other side of one felt like being shut out of a secret club. "Let's sit down and talk," Amelia said, leading me into the living room. Her house was beautiful in the way magazine houses are beautiful. Everything matched. Nothing was out of place. Minimalist furniture that looked like no one had ever actually sat on it, and glass coffee tables that reflected light from windows so clean they seemed invisible. It was the kind of house that made you afraid to touch anything. I perched on the edge of their white sofa, my muddy shoes planted firmly on their flawless hardwood floor. Julian noticed and gave a slight wince. "So, what's the plan?" Amelia asked, sitting in the chair across from me. Not next to me on the sofa where she might have put an arm around her grieving mother, but opposite me, as if we were conducting a business meeting. "Well, the insurance adjuster said it'll take a few weeks to process everything. Maybe a month. I was hoping I could stay here until then, just until I find a small apartment or something." The silence that followed stretched a few seconds too long. I watched Julian's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. He leaned over and put a hand on Amelia's arm in a gesture that looked supportive, but felt possessive. "Mom," Amelia began, and I knew from her tone that whatever came next would break my heart. "The thing is, Julian and I have been talking, and we really value our privacy here. We work long hours and this is our sanctuary, you understand? I blinked at her, uncomprehending. I wouldn't get in your way. I'd stay quiet, help with cooking and cleaning. I wouldn't be any trouble. Julian leaned forward, his voice smooth but firm. It's not about trouble, Clara, it's about space. This is our first home together and we're still finding our rhythm as a couple. I'm her mother, I said, the words sharper than I intended. Of course you are, Julian replied calmly, and for that very reason we thought you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. Somewhere you can have your independence while you rebuild. I looked at Amelia, waiting for her to contradict him, to remember that I was the woman who had stayed up with her through every fever, who had worked overtime to pay for her college textbooks, who had held her hand through her divorce 2 years ago. Instead, she just nodded. Julian's right, Mom. We think you'd be happier with your own space. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest constrict as if someone were squeezing my lungs. Happier, Amelia? I lost everything yesterday. And you think I'd be happier alone in some hotel room than here with my family? It doesn't have to be a hotel, Julian said quickly. There are some very nice extended stay apartments near the mall. Very clean, very safe, and they have little kitchenettes so you can cook for yourself. I stared at him. This man who had been in my daughter's life for 18 months, telling me where I should live after losing my home. And how exactly do you suggest I pay for this wonderful apartment? The insurance money won't arrive for weeks. Amelia shifted uncomfortably. I could help with that. A few hundred to get you started. A few hundred, as if I were a distant acquaintance she barely knew, not the woman who gave her life. Amelia, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I rocked you to sleep every night. I walked the halls with you when you had nightmares. I taught you how to ride a bike and helped you with your homework. I held you when you cried because Gabriel broke your heart in the 8th grade. Her face flinched, but Julian squeezed her arm harder. No one is questioning your history, he said. We just think everyone would be more comfortable with some boundaries. Boundaries. I'd heard that word from the therapist Amelia saw after her divorce. Everything was about boundaries. You're kicking me out, I stated bluntly. We're not kicking you out, Amelia protested. We're just saying maybe this arrangement wouldn't work for anyone. Whose idea was this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I could see it in the way Julian sat back just a little, satisfied as if he'd won. We discussed it together, Amelia said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting in a way that reminded me I was 64 years old and all alone in the world. I understand. Mom, don't be like that. We're trying to do what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? I repeated the words as if they were a foreign language. What would be best, Amelia, is if your mother didn't have to sleep in her car tonight. Julian's perfectly composed face arranged itself into an expression of concern. You don't have to sleep in your car. Like I said, there are options. I looked around their immaculate living room one last time, at the photos of Amelia and Julian, with none of me, at the expensive furniture no one was allowed to really use, at my daughter, who had chosen this cold, polished man over her own mother. You're right, I said finally. There are always options. I picked up my 3 bags and David's toolbox. Their weight felt heavier now that I knew I wasn't welcome. Amelia stood, looking uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to change her mind. I'll call you in a few days, she said, once you get settled somewhere. Don't bother, I replied, surprised at the steel in my own voice. I wouldn't want to intrude on your sanctuary. Julian had the decency to look a little ashamed, but not enough to speak up. Not enough to say, wait, this is wrong, she's your mother. I walked out of that perfect house with its perfect couple and their perfect boundaries and sat in Mrs. Gable's borrowed car for a long time. Through their front window, I could see Amelia and Julian talking, probably about how difficult I was being. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years after David died telling myself I was strong and independent. Now, when I truly needed help, I was discovering that independence is a luxury you can only afford when you have options. I drove to a supermarket parking lot and just sat there as the sun went down, trying to figure out where a 64-year-old woman with $150 in her purse and 3 bags of flood-damaged belongings was supposed to sleep. The car was getting cold, and I had maybe an hour before a security guard would notice me and ask me to leave. That's when I remembered the business card. The one I'd kept in my wallet for nearly 46 years, yellowed with age and soft from being handled. A card I never thought I'd actually use, from a boy I loved when the world was young and anything seemed possible. Leo Vance, the boy who'd promised to come back for me someday before life got in the way and someday never came. I pulled out my phone and looked at the faded numbers, wondering if they still worked, wondering if he was even still alive, wondering if I had the courage to find out. I spent 2 nights sleeping in that borrowed car before I found the courage to make the call. 2 nights of waking with an aching body and the taste of humiliation in my mouth. 2 nights of moving from one parking lot to another so security wouldn't notice the old woman living out of her vehicle. 2 nights of using gas station bathrooms to wash my face and brush my teeth, avoiding my own reflection because I couldn't stand what I saw. The business card felt like tissue paper between my fingers, worn thin by 4.5 decades of being carried but never used. Leo Vance. It read in faded blue ink. Below it, a phone number with an area code I didn't recognize. On the back, in my own youthful handwriting, "I'll always remember you. C." I'd written those words at 18, believing with the absolute certainty of youth that Leo Vance would be the great love of my life. He was 20, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a smile that lit up any room. He worked at the downtown cinema and dreamed of bigger things, of building something that mattered. We dated for 10 months, which at 18 feels like a lifetime. He used to take me to the overlook in the hills outside town, where we'd sit in his beat-up car and talk about our plans. He was going to start his own business, he said, something with movies, maybe, or education, something that would change the world. "I'll come back for you, Clara," he promised the night before he left for college in another state. "I'll make something of myself, and then I'll come back and marry you." But promises made at 18 have a way of fading. At first, he wrote long, passionate letters, full of dreams and plans. I wrote back, telling him about my business course, my job at the library, and how I was waiting for him. Then the letters grew shorter, less frequent. By the time I met David 9 months later at a party, Leo felt like a beautiful dream. David was steady and reliable, already 27 with a good job at an engineering firm. He didn't promise me the world, but he promised me a home, a family, and security. When he proposed after 6 months, I said yes. I tucked Leo's business card into my bridal jewelry box, a secret talisman I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Now, 46 years later, sitting in a car that wasn't mine, I wondered what had become of that dreamy-eyed boy. I'd followed him discreetly over the years, the way you do with first loves. Through mutual friends, I heard he'd made good on his promises, starting a chain of independent cinemas that grew into something major. He never married, which surprised people. Too busy building his empire, they said. The last I'd heard, maybe 8 years ago, was that his company, Vance Theaters, had expanded beyond our state. Art house cinemas with cafes, event spaces, and educational programs. The kid from the local cinema had become a man who appeared in business magazines. What would this man want with a 64-year-old widow sleeping in a borrowed car? The rational part of my brain told me it was ridiculous, pathetic even. You don't just call someone after 46 years because your life has fallen apart. But rational thought is a luxury when you're counting the change in your purse. By the 3rd morning, I couldn't take it anymore. My back ached from sleeping curled up in the front seat. My clothes smelled of car interior, and I'd spent the last of my cash on a gas station sandwich that tasted of cardboard and despair. I sat in a coffee shop parking lot staring at the card, my hands trembling from more than just the morning chill. What would I even say? "Hi, Leo. Remember me? I'm homeless now. Can you help?" The number was probably disconnected, or it would ring some secretary who would politely inform me that Mr. Vance was far too important to take such calls. But what if he wasn't? What if he answered? My heart pounded as I dialed the number, each digit feeling like a step off a cliff. It rang once, twice. Vance Theaters, Leo speaking. His voice was deeper now, polished by time and responsibility, but it was unmistakably his. After 46 years, I would have known that voice anywhere. I almost hung up, but something in his tone, a warmth that traveled through the phone and wrapped around me like a blanket, made me speak. "Leo, it's Clara. Clara Martin. Well, I'm Clara Hayes now, but I used to be a Martin." There was a silence long enough for me to think the call had dropped, that he'd hung up, that he had no idea who I was. Then, Clara. Just my name, spoken like a prayer, like he couldn't believe it. "I'm so sorry to call like this." I rushed out, desperate to explain before he could hang up. "I know it's been so long, and I probably shouldn't be calling, but I didn't know who else." "Where are you?" He cut in, his voice sharp with concern. "I'm in Oak Ridge. Well, actually, I'm in a parking lot in Oak Ridge. I know this sounds crazy, but my house was destroyed in the flood, and my daughter, she doesn't want me to stay with her, and I have nowhere to go." The words poured out, each one harder to say than the last. Admitting your own child had turned you away was like admitting you'd failed at the most fundamental part of being human. "Give me your location," Leo said, his voice all business now. "I'm coming to get you." "You don't have to do that. I don't know why I called. I think I just needed to hear a friendly voice. Clara." His tone cracked. "No arguments. Tell me where you are. I'm on my way to my car now." Through the phone, I could hear a door closing and an engine turning over. He was really coming. This man I hadn't spoken to in 46 years was dropping everything to rescue me from a coffee shop parking lot. I gave him the address, my voice a whisper. "Leo, I'm not the girl you remember." "Neither am I," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "But I've been waiting 46 years for this call." After I hung up, I sat in that parking lot for what felt like an eternity, alternating between panic and disbelief. What was I doing? This was insane. You couldn't just pick up a relationship after 4 decades. But as I watched the entrance to the lot, waiting for a car I wouldn't recognize carrying a man who might not recognize me, I felt something I hadn't felt since the flood warnings began to blare. Hope. It was a foolish hope, maybe, one that could lead to more pain. But at 64, with nothing left to lose, hope was worth the risk. At 1:45 p.m. on the dot, a silver Volvo pulled into the parking lot, moving slowly as the driver searched for someone. I watched through my windshield as the car drew closer, my heart thumping against my ribs. The windows were tinted, but something deep in my chest told me it was him. The car stopped 2 spaces away and the driver's door opened. Even after 46 years, with gray hair and lines around his eyes, carrying the weight of decades I hadn't shared, I knew him instantly. Leo Vance stepped out of that car as if stepping out of a dream, and when his eyes met mine, the years between us collapsed. Leo walked toward my car with the same quiet confidence he'd had at 20, now refined by success and maturity. He wore dark jeans and a navy blazer that probably cost more than my clothes for an entire year, but his eyes, those expressive brown eyes that had inhabited my dreams for decades, were exactly the same. I wanted to hide, to shrink down in my seat. I looked terrible. I hadn't properly washed my hair in 3 days. My clothes were wrinkled and smelled of desperation. But he was already at my car door, tapping gently on the window with a smile that made my heart flutter like I was 17 again. I rolled down the window, suddenly unable to breathe. "Hello, Clara," he said softly. Up close, I could see the changes time had made. His dark hair was now silver at the temples, cut short and neat. Lines fanned out from the corners of his eyes and etched his mouth. He was broader in the shoulders, more solid. But when he smiled at me, I saw the boy who used to take me to the Overlook and tell me his dreams. "Hi," I managed to say, my voice a whisper. He studied my face for a long moment, his eyes taking in every detail. I wanted to apologize for the state I was in, for how far I'd fallen, for calling him after all these years with nothing but trouble. Instead, he said 3 words that changed everything. "You're beautiful." I started to cry. Right there, with Leo Vance standing beside my borrowed car, I just fell apart. 46 years of unshed tears, 3 days of sleeping rough, and a lifetime of feeling I wasn't quite enough. All came out in deep, racking sobs I couldn't control. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to shush me or tell me it would be okay. He just opened my car door, helped me out, and wrapped me in his arms as I unraveled against his chest. He smelled of soft cologne and new books, of success and stability, of everything I had lost and everything I had never had. His blazer was soft against my cheek, and his arms were strong around my shaking shoulders. "I'm so sorry," I gasped. "I'm so sorry, Leo. I shouldn't have called. I shouldn't have dragged you into this." "Shh," he murmured, stroking my back. "You should have called years ago." When the tears finally stopped, I pulled away, embarrassed by the wet patch I'd left on his expensive blazer. I must look like a wreck. He reached out and brushed a tear from my cheek, his touch as gentle as a breeze. "You look like someone who's been through hell and survived. That's not a wreck, Clara. That's courage." I laughed, a shaky, bitter sound. Courage? I'm 64 years old, sleeping in a borrowed car because my own daughter doesn't want me. That's not courage. It's pathetic. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw a flash of anger. "Your daughter is wrong. You don't know her. I don't need to. I know you." He paused, his hands still resting on my shoulders. Or at least I did. And the Clara Martin I knew would never turn her back on someone in need, especially not family. The way he said my maiden name, like it was something precious he'd kept safe, made my chest ache. "That was a long time ago," I said. "I'm not that girl anymore." "Maybe not," he agreed, "but I'd like to get to know the woman she became." He helped me get my belongings, the 3 bags, David's toolbox, my purse. If he was surprised by how little I had left, he didn't show it. He carried it all to his Volvo as if my flood-damaged clothes and broken memories were a precious cargo. "Where are we going?" I asked as he held the passenger door open for me. "Home," he said simply. The drive took about an hour through increasingly upscale neighborhoods until we reached an area I'd never seen before, with estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Leo turned into a long driveway marked only by a small bronze plaque that read Vance. The drive curved through mature trees and manicured gardens before opening onto a circular drive in front of a house that took my breath away. It wasn't gaudy or ostentatious. It was elegant, understated, and built to last. Stone and wood with tall windows that caught the afternoon light. "Leo," I breathed, staring at the monument to everything he had achieved. "This is incredible." He parked the car but didn't get out right away. He just sat, looking at the house as if seeing it through my eyes. "It's too big," he said quietly. "Always has been. I built it thinking I'd fill it one day, but..." He shrugged, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "Some dreams don't work out the way you plan. You never married?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He turned to look at me, his expression thoughtful. I came close a couple of times, but something was always missing. "You," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The word hung between us in the quiet car, freighted with 46 years of what-ifs. I wanted to ask what he meant, how I could have been missing from a life I was never a part of. But before I could find the words, he was already getting out of the car, coming around to open my door. The house was even more stunning inside. hardwood floors that glowed like honey, soaring ceilings, and furniture that looked like it belonged in design magazines. But it didn't feel cold. There were books everywhere, shelves lining entire walls, comfortable reading chairs near windows, and photographs scattered on side tables. It felt like a home where someone actually lived. "Are you hungry?" Leo asked, leading me into a kitchen bigger than my old living room. I was about to make lunch when you called. I realized I was starving. Yesterday's gas station sandwich felt like a week ago. "I don't want to be a bother," I started, but he cut me off with a look. "Clara, stop. You are not a bother. You are—" He paused, searching for the words. "You're the answer to a question I've been asking myself for 46 years. While he cooked, and he could really cook, moving around that huge kitchen with an easy confidence, I studied the photographs. Leo at movie premieres, cutting ribbons, speaking with famous directors. Leo with various women at charity galas, always smiling but never looking completely fulfilled. "Tell me about your life," he said, placing a plate of perfectly cooked risotto in front of me. "Tell me about David, about your daughter, about everything I missed." And I did. Over a lunch that tasted like heaven, I told him about my marriage to David, the kind, reliable man who had given me security but not passion. About Amelia, the daughter I had loved so fiercely, who had grown up to be a stranger. I told him about widowhood, the flood that had taken everything I owned, and the daughter who had taken everything I had left. Leo listened without interrupting, his brown eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm so sorry," he said finally. "I'm sorry about David, and your house, and your daughter. But I'm not sorry you called. Why?" The question came out smaller than I intended. He reached across the table and took my hand. "Because I never stopped thinking about you," he said softly. "Because every theater I opened, every dream I realized, it was all to be worthy of you if we ever met again. Clara, I know it sounds crazy. I know 46 years is a long time. But when I heard your voice today, it was like the missing piece of my life finally clicked into place. I looked down at our joined hands, his tanned and well cared for, mine time-worn and showing every one of my 64 years. I'm not the girl you remember." "No," he agreed. "You're better. You're real. You've lived and loved and lost and survived. That 18-year-old girl was a promise. You're the woman that promise grew into." The words settled around my heart like a warm blanket. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt seen, not as someone's mother or wife or burden, but as myself. "What happens now?" I asked. Leo smiled, that same radiant smile that had made me fall in love with him when the world was young. "Now, we figure out what the rest of our lives look like, together, if you'll have me." And as I sat in his beautiful kitchen, filled with good food and possibility, I realized that sometimes the flood that destroys your old life is just clearing the way for the life you were always meant to have. Living with Leo was like discovering a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. The first week was strange, tiptoeing around each other like polite strangers. He gave me the entire guest wing of his house, a bedroom larger than my old living room, a private bathroom with a huge tub, and a small sitting room overlooking his gardens. I felt like I was in a luxury hotel, afraid to touch anything. But Leo was patient, and slowly I began to relax. He had a housekeeper, Maria, who came 3 days a week, but on the other days, I found myself cooking for him. It started small, making coffee, preparing simple lunches. But Leo appreciated everything with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in decades. "This is wonderful," he said one night, savoring a stew I'd made from my grandmother's recipe. "I haven't had a home-cooked meal like this in years. It's nothing fancy," I protested, but inside I was glowing. When was the last time someone had appreciated my cooking? Amelia used to complain I made the same 5 dishes over and over. Leo just shook his head. "It's perfect. You're perfect." That word, perfect, should have made me uncomfortable. I was 64 with gray hair and permanent lines around my eyes. My hands were age-spotted, my body softer than it used to be. I was anything but perfect. But when Leo looked at me, I saw myself reflected in his eyes as someone beautiful, worthy of love and gentle care. We fell into routines that felt as natural as breathing. Breakfast together on the back porch, afternoon walks around his property, and evenings spent talking. We had 46 years to catch up on, and we did it slowly, carefully, like archaeologists examining precious artifacts. I told him about the lean years after David died, the loneliness of widowhood, the way people treat you like half a person when your husband is gone. He told me about his business, which had grown from one small cinema into a chain with branches in 3 states. He told me about the women he had dated, smart, successful women who looked perfect on his arm but never made him feel whole. There was one woman, he said one night as we sat by his fireplace, Marina, a publisher, brilliant, passionate. Everyone said we were perfect for each other. I felt a pang of jealousy that surprised me with its intensity. What happened? I proposed, he said quietly. On her birthday 6 years ago, big production, restaurant overlooking the ocean, a family ring. She said yes. But as the wedding date got closer, I felt something was wrong. Not with her, but with me. He paused, staring into the fire. The night before the wedding, I called it off. Leo, no. What did you tell her? He looked at me, his brown eyes earnest. The truth, that I was still in love with a girl I'd known 46 years ago, and it wouldn't be fair to marry her while my heart belonged to someone else. The words hit me like a physical blow. You called off your wedding for me, for the memory of you, for the possibility that someday you might need me and I'd be here waiting. I stared at him, this handsome, successful man who could have had anyone. That's insane, is it? He leaned forward, taking my hands. Is it any more insane than the fact that you kept my business card in your wallet for 46 years? He was right. We were both insane, both living with the ghosts of what might have been, but somehow our particular brand of insanity had brought us back to each other. 2 weeks into my stay, Amelia called. I was in Leo's kitchen making dinner and humming to myself, actually humming, something I hadn't done in years, when my phone rang. Amelia's name on the screen made my stomach clench. "Hi, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Mom." Her tone was carefully controlled. "I've been trying to reach you. Your phone keeps going to voicemail." That was true. I'd been screening my calls, not ready to deal with her. I've been busy. Busy doing what? "Mrs. Gable said you moved out days ago." "Where are you?" I looked around Leo's beautiful kitchen, at the fresh flowers he'd brought home that morning. "I'm staying with a friend." "What friend?" "Mom, you don't have friends with houses like this." Her assumption stung, partly because it had been true for so long. I had let my friendships fade, too tired and proud to maintain them. "You'd be surprised," I said coolly. There was a pause. I could hear her processing. "Mom, I think we need to talk. Julian and I have been discussing it, and we think maybe we were too hasty. Maybe you could stay in our guest room for a while, just until you get back on your feet." The offer that would have meant the world to me a month ago now felt hollow and insulting. What changed your mind? We realized we were maybe too focused on our own needs. Family should stick together. What she meant, I realized, was that she'd probably heard through the grapevine that her mother was no longer sleeping in a car. Someone had mentioned seeing me with a distinguished man in a luxury car. Amelia was curious, and curiosity had made her generous. "That's very kind of you," I said, "but I'm perfectly happy where I am. Mom, you can't just move in with some stranger. It's not safe. What do you know about this person?" "I know that he never once made me feel like a burden," I said quietly. "I know he values my company, appreciates my cooking, and tells me I'm beautiful every single day." The silence that followed was so long I thought she might have hung up. Is this some kind of relationship? Amelia finally asked, her voice laced with disapproval or embarrassment. "I don't think that's any of your business," I said, surprising myself with my own directness. "Of course it's my business. You're my mother. I'm worried you're being taken advantage of." "The way you took advantage of me?" The words were out before I could stop them. "Mom, that's not fair, isn't it? You turned me away when I needed help the most. You chose your boyfriend's comfort over your mother's safety. And now that you think I might have found happiness, you're suddenly concerned?" I could hear Julian's voice in the background. "Look," Amelia said, her tone shifting to the patient voice she used when she thought I was being difficult. "Why don't you bring your friend over for dinner on Sunday? We'd like to meet him." "No, Amelia. You don't get to approve or disapprove of my choices anymore. You gave up that right when you turned me away." "We didn't turn you away. We just thought—" "You thought of yourselves, exactly like you're doing now." I took a deep breath, feeling stronger than I had in years. "I'm happy, Amelia. Genuinely happy. If you want to be a part of my life, you're welcome to try, but you no longer get to dictate the terms." I hung up before she could reply, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Leo found me a few minutes later, standing at the kitchen window. "Everything okay?" I leaned back against his chest, letting his warmth chase away the chill. "My daughter called. She wants to meet you?" "Good," Leo said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "I've been wanting to meet her." I turned in his arms. "You're not worried about what she'll think?" Leo smiled, that confident grin that had made me fall for him the first time. "Clara, I waited 46 years for you to come home. I'm not about to let anyone, not even your daughter, make you doubt that you belong here." And as I stood in his arms, in that beautiful kitchen, I realized he was right. I did belong here. Not because of his money or his house, but because of the way he looked at me, like I was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered. For the first time since the flood, I felt I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The wedding was nothing like my first one. When I married David, it was all about what others expected: a white dress, a church ceremony, and a banquet hall reception. We invited everyone we knew because that's what you did. You performed the ritual for the community. This time, Leo and I did exactly what we wanted. The ceremony took place in his backyard on a sunny afternoon in March, 5 months after that phone call. The justice of the peace was an old friend of Leo's, and the only witnesses were Maria, his housekeeper, and Michael, his business partner. I wore a simple green dress that Leo said matched my eyes, and he wore a gray suit that made him look distinguished and elegant. No fuss, no fanfare, no stress. Just two people who had found each other again after nearly half a century, promising to spend the rest of their lives together. Amelia came. I debated whether to even invite her, but Leo convinced me. "She's your daughter," he said simply. "You'll regret it if you don't give her the chance to make it right." So I called her 2 weeks before. "Leo and I are getting married," I said. "March 15th at 2 p.m. You're welcome to come, but Julian is not invited." She showed up alone, looking uncomfortable in an expensive dress. She shook Leo's hand politely, made small talk, and even managed a smile when the judge pronounced us husband and wife. But I could see the calculation in her eyes as she assessed Leo's house, his car, and the obvious signs of wealth. This wasn't about supporting her mother's happiness. This was about positioning herself. This morning, I woke up in my husband's arms, in the bedroom that has become ours, in the house that has become a home. The sunlight streamed through the windows overlooking the gardens we've tended together, and I could smell the coffee Leo brews every morning. At 64, I am happier than I have ever been. Not because of Leo's money or his beautiful house, but because someone sees me, truly sees me, and chooses to love what he sees. The flood took my old life and shattered it, but sometimes I think as I watch Leo read his paper across the breakfast table, destruction is just another word for a new beginning. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you truly needed. And sometimes If you're very, very lucky, first love gets a second chance to become forever love. The business card I carried for 46 years now sits in a frame on Leo's desk, a reminder that some promises are worth keeping even when it takes nearly half a century. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video appearing on your screen for a tale of betrayal with a twist you'll never see coming.